Cool. Okay, so Torah portion Vayera, that's how it's pronounced. We're going to continue to go through Genesis, and as we saw a couple of weeks ago, the people in Genesis don't have the scriptures. They don't have the Torah. But what they do have is faith, so that when Yehovah appears to them, they do what he says to do. They get their instructions live from Yehovah. And we're going to see Abraham kind of get into grips with who Yehovah is. He's learning about him on the fly as all of these things are happening. And we're going to look at the idea. Anyone who came to Sukkot knows that what's been on my mind recently is this idea of put away the foreign gods from among you. As we've all kind of come to a point where we're obedient to Torah. Torah is not a problem. What's a problem is some of the false ideas that we've got about who Yehovah is. I'm going to be particularly looking at it in Torah portion YHVH, but it comes up quite a bit in this Torah portion as well, because we've just got some foreign concepts of who he is that don't come from the Bible. They just come from, I don't know, either our experience or what we were expecting, and then how our walks have turned out, and they're not actually scriptural. He's very gracious. He meets us where we're at, and he meets us in these things. I spoke a couple of weeks ago about how I had all sorts of crazy ideas about what God is as I would have seen it at the time, and he met me where I was in my understanding, but he also drew me out of that. He guided me through it. Hebrews 11:8-10 says, "By belief Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he was about to receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. By belief he sojourned in the land of promise as a stranger, dwelling in tents with Yitzchak and Yaakov, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking for the city having foundations, whose builder and maker is Elohim." Okay, so he received these instructions from Yehovah, and for us, we've received the instructions. We've got his word, we've got his Torah. And he went out, and he just went to the place where he'd been instructed to go. He was living life as he'd been instructed to live life. But when he got there, even though he'd been told, "You're going to inherit this place. That's what I'm going to do. This is my promise to you." When he arrived there, he just followed the instruction that he'd been given. And that was enough. He wasn't constantly in prayer to Yehovah saying, "How are you going to do this? How are you going to bring about the thing that you've promised?" He just went and he lived life in the land. You know, when Lot was kidnapped, when all the things that were happening to him, these were just events that were happening, and he just trusted in Yehovah. He followed the instructions that he'd been given, trusted in Yehovah, and dealt with the events as they came up in his life. But this is where we're going to find him at the beginning of the Torah portion. It says that he was dwelling in tents. Yehovah appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre. As we've seen before, Mamre was a guy. They were his terebinth trees, while he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. So he lifted his eyes and looked, and he saw 3 men standing opposite him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the ground. Okay, so these people are described as 3 men. And he said, "Yehovah, if I found favor in your eyes, please do not pass your servant by. So, don't ever let anybody ever tell you that Yehovah has never come to the earth as a man, because he has." And this is something that we're going to look at. Okay, in the beginning, there was Yehovah. Yehovah created the heavens and he created the earth. But the important thing about this is that the heavens and the earth are creations. Yehovah is outside of them. He created them, but he was outside of them. The thing which throws people off when they're trying to understand how Yehovah could have come to the earth as a man, how Yeshua could be Yehovah, is their concept of who Yehovah is that he's the Father. But where's the Father? The Father's in heaven. Okay? He wasn't creating the heavens and the earth from heaven. He created the heavens and the earth from outside of heaven, and then he came to dwell in the temple which is in heaven. And there's a temple on the earth as well, and he came and he dwelt in the temple on the earth. So he was simultaneously dwelling in the temple in heaven and the temple on the earth. He can also come to dwell in us as his temple as well. But it's all YHVH, because YHVH is outside of it all, and he is coming into his creation. So the Father in heaven isn't the entirety of who YHVH is. He's one of the ways that he exists and operates within his creation. So YHVH is the Father. Okay? But YHVH can also come to the earth as a man, and that's what we see in this Torah portion. People will say, oh, you don't see anything like that in the Old Testament, do you? Of course you do. YHVH was a man on the earth. So please let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And let me bring a piece of bread and refresh your hearts, and then go on, for this is why you've come to your servant. And they said, do as you've said. And this is an important thing for us to recognize. Okay? The Hebrew does seem to be that Abraham is saying, this is why you've come to your servant. And I don't know why he was saying that, but I can take something from him having said that I can apply to our lives. We tend to do this, don't we? When something happens in our life, we tend to look for the reason why it's happened, and we say things like, everything happens for a reason, or if something bad happens, we say, there will have been a reason for it. That's not scriptural. That's a foreign God. That is not the God of Scripture at all. YHVH is outside of time. He knows everything that was going to happen, and he uses all those things for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. But that is totally different from saying that everything happens for a reason. Okay? That's not true. When something happens in our lives, we can't be saying, well, there's a reason for it. We could say, YHVH will use this for good, ultimately, but we can't say that everything happens for a reason. That's not scriptural. That's an example of the sort of mythology that I'm talking about. People in the Christian church have this idea of a mythological God who acts in very much the same way as the gods of the pagans. There's a very new agey idea of, everything happens for a reason. When I moved into my flat, there's a girl who lives opposite, and she was locked out of her flat one day. I was speaking to her, and she said, what do you do? I said, I'm a pastor. Believe in God. And I was telling her a little bit about that, and she said, I believe everything happens for a reason too. And that's kind of the concept that people have in their heads of what it is to believe in God. It's certainly very prevalent in the Christian church, but these are the sort of things that we need to weed out of our understanding and the way that we expect him to operate in our lives. Judges 6:15-23 says, and he said to him, O YHVH, with what do I save Yisrael? See, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am least in my father's house. And YHVH said to him, because I am with you, you shall smite the Midianites as one man. This is really key for us to understand. How are we to go about our lives if we're not to constantly be praying to him for direction, constantly be asking him to show us a little bit of the future? That's the key to it, isn't it? Because I am with you. And that's all that we need to know. We don't need to be trying to ask him directly for wisdom for our lives. We just get on and we do his instructions. That is by far and away enough wisdom for us to live the lives that we need to live. He operates in the background. He is with us throughout all of it. But we're constantly trying to take some of his control of the situation and ask him for it kind of in advance. But that's enough for us, the idea of be still and know that I am God. Okay, you don't need to understand all of this in advance. In fact, you can't understand all of this in advance. There's no way that this could be related to you, and then you could live it out. If you knew what the future was in advance, you would change the future by your knowledge of it. And he said to him, please, if I found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that it is you who are speaking with me. And we've looked at this before, but this is something vital, because people will use phrases like, Yehovah told me this, or Yehovah told me that. But when he appears to these people, he appears to them directly, and he tells them very, very plainly what it is that he wants them to do. If he's going to say, I want you to do this, he appears to them and tells them, or he'll appear in a dream and tell them very explicitly what it is that he wants them to do. Okay, people will get the idea that Yehovah is speaking to them somehow through the events of their life or whatever it is. But we've got to come to terms with the fact that that's not the Elohim that we see in scriptures. I've talked before about looking at signs and looking at things that are happening around us and subjectively interpreting them and almost treating Yehovah as if he's going to give us a trail of breadcrumbs to follow through our life. And people will say things like, I prayed about it and I feel peace about it. So what? The heart's deceitfully wicked above all things. Praying and feeling peace about things is not found in Scripture. Praying and not feeling something is, not feeling peace about it. That's not a sign that that's not what you're to do. Okay, again, we don't find anything like that in Scripture. We have our desires, what we want to do. And sometimes we're going to feel good about an idea, and sometimes we're going to be scared. And Yehovah says to us, when these thoughts come up in your heart and you feel scared, do not fear, for I am with you. He doesn't say, oh, if those thoughts come up in your heart, that's a bad sign because you don't feel peace about it. That's a foreign God. But these are the terms very much that Christians speak in, and it kind of becomes incorporated into everyone's idea of who God is. So when they come to God, they're expecting all of these things. And as I say, he's gracious and he meets us in those things. And not to say that he won't work through a situation like that. The situations that I described, I had such a crazy idea of who he was. But he met me in that and he was gracious. But there did come a point when it was enough. And I stopped taking my insulin. And I ended up in hospital. I ended up in an ambulance. So he guided me through it, but then when it came to a point, he was like, no, this is wrong. Your understanding here is wrong. And then something bad happened. It seemed to be bad to me, but he was with me in all of it. And I learned something about who he was through something that I thought was very bad at the time. And there's been many incidents of this happening recently. Please do not move away from here until I come to you and bring out my offering and set it before you. And he said, I shall stay until you return. And Gideon went in and prepared a young goat and unleavened bread from an ephah of flour. The meat he put in a basket and the broth in a pot. And he brought them out to him under the terebinth tree, and he presented this. This is an incredibly similar situation to what we're seeing with Abraham here. He takes an animal of the flock, he prepares it. He makes unleavened bread from an ephah of flour. Now when he goes into Sarah, he says, take 3 measures of fine flour and prepare unleavened bread. But that word measure is actually thought to be 1/3 of an ephah. So 3 of them would be an ephah of flour. And where are they when this is happening? They're underneath the terebinth tree. So it's a very similar situation that we're seeing here. And the angel of Elohim said to him, take the meat and the unleavened bread and lay them on this rock and pour out the broth. And he did so. And the angel of Yehovah put forth the end of the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened bread. The fire went up out the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread. And the angel of Yehovah went from his sight. So he gives him a sign. He asks him for a sign. So I've said it to people before, but if you think that Yehovah is speaking to you in a way that is just completely unscriptural, then fair enough. but test it. Ask him for a sign that he's speaking to you, because he's not the author of confusion. He doesn't tell you something and then refuse to validate that with you. And if he doesn't give you a sign, it wasn't him. And that can be really dangerous, because we know that we're prone to listening to deceptive and seductive spirits. So if he doesn't give a sign for whatever it is, then it's not from him. I would say to people, don't be looking for those sorts of things anyway to instruct you in your life, because it's unreliable, because it's not found in Scripture. And as I say, we've come to a point where we're obedient to the Torah now. That's just something that we do by faith. But we need to draw closer to Elohim, because we want to know who he actually is. We want to be able to live that life as well, where we're not constantly looking for some kind of guidance and some kind of reassurance, because the idea that everything happens for a reason is incredibly seductive, because it kind of gives you a comfort blanket. Oh, everything's happening for a reason, it's fine. We actually need to be getting our sense of security from knowing that he is Elohim, being still and knowing that he is Elohim in whatever it is that we're going through in our lives. And that provides a much greater sense of security than the false notion of who he is and the false deity idea. And when Gideon saw that he was an angel of Yehovah, Gideon said, "O Master Yehovah, for I have seen an angel of Yehovah face to face." And Yehovah said to him, "Peace be with you. Do not fear. You do not die." So that's an interesting phrase, isn't it, for Yehovah on the earth to be using, "Peace be with you." I know somebody else who used that phrase. So Abraham ran into the tent to Sarah and said, "Hurry, make ready 3 measures of fine flour, knead it and make cakes." And Abraham ran to the herd, took a tender and good calf and gave it to a young man, and he hurried to prepare it. And he took curds and milk and the calf which he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree as they ate. So Abraham knows that this is Yehovah. I don't know if he recognizes him from when he's appeared to him previously or whatever it is, but he knows that it's Yehovah. And he's running around like, can you imagine if Yehovah came to visit you one day and you're like, "Do you want some food?" yeah, that'd be nice. And they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And he said, "See, in the tent." The word "see" is not there. She just says "in the tent." And he said, "I shall certainly return to you according to the time of life." Which is interesting. You think, well, what does he mean? Maybe it was a Hebrew idiom. But we'll look at what it says in the Septuagint. "And see, Sarah, your wife, is to have a son." And Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in age, and Sarah was past the way of women. Now this is actually really interesting. She was past the way of women. This is translated variously as things like she was past the age of childbearing, various different things. But if we look at what the Hebrew words are, okay, so we've got chadal, and chadal does mean to cease or to stop. But an interesting way that you could translate it, I'm not saying this is how it should be translated, but is to leave something undone. Okay, so something was left undone. What was left undone was this, the arach. And the arach is the way or the path. Okay, the path of women. And it's interesting to me that what is described here as the path of women is childbearing. And what it could be translated to be saying is the path of women was left undone in her, which is an interesting concept. Okay. Sarah laughed within herself, saying, "After I've grown old, shall I have pleasure, my master being old too?" This is what it says in the Septuagint. It says, "And he said, returning, I will come to you according to this time, to the hour," is what it says in the Septuagint, not according to the time of life. and will have a son, Sarah your wife. And Sarah heard by the door of the tent, being behind him. And Abraham and Sarah were older, advanced of days, ceased and Sarah to be in the feminine ways. And this passage actually shows us some interesting stuff, or some interesting considerations when we're taking what the Septuagint says compared to what the Masoretic text says. In the first verse, okay, we've got according to this time, to the hour. Now that's very different from according to the time of life in the Hebrew. Okay, so that's distinctly different. Whereas in the second verse, you read it and go, well, that's very different as well. But what we need to consider is the feminine ways. It's kind of the same way that the English translators have taken the path of women and given us an interpretation of its meaning. So we've got one which is actually very distinctly different, and we've got one which is a translation. It's not saying that it's definitely ceased, and it's not saying it should be the feminine ways instead of the way that it's rendered in the Hebrew. It's just a translation of the Hebrew. So we do have to be very careful when we're taking these things, that we don't say, well, that seems to be very different, without looking any deeper at the words that are used. Laughed and Sarah in herself, saying, for not yet has it happened to me until now, and my Lord is older. Okay, so it kind of ties in with the idea of the path of women was left undone in her. And she says, for not yet it has happened to me until now. And the Lord said to Abraham, why is it that Sarah laughed in herself, saying, indeed, is it truly I will bear and have grown old? Is impossible to the Lord the saying, at this time, to the hour, I will return to you, and there will be to Sarah a son? Okay, so it's different, isn't it? Verse 13 says, and Yehovah said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I truly have a child since I am old? Is any matter too hard for Yehovah? At the appointed time, I'm going to return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah is to have a son. Now, again, we can see something interesting from the translation, because we know the appointed time in Hebrew is Moedim. They're not always the feast days. The feast days are Yehovah's Moedim, so they're his appointed times, but there can be an appointed time outside of that. It's a concept which exists independently. Okay, at the appointed time, and the word that's used in the Greek there is the word that is in Genesis 1 when it says they shall be for days and years and for seasons. The word seasons we know is Moedim in the Hebrew. So what we have in the Greek is a rendering of what it says in the Hebrew again, but it seems to be written differently. But again, this according to the time of life, okay, that is the et chai in Hebrew, et time, chai life. So it literally says the time of life, whereas in the Greek, it does use the word ora, which is hour. Okay, to the hour, it says in the Greek. So I'd suggest that that's a significant difference. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And he said, no, but you did laugh. And this is interesting to me with this idea of these people are coming to know who he is through their interactions with him. When we consider in Exodus 6:3, it says, I appeared to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov as El Shaddai. And by my name, Yehovah, I have not been known to them. Okay, so when he appeared to them, he appeared as God Almighty, the powerful El. Okay, he said, by my name, Yehovah, I have not been known to them. And we've looked before at how Yehovah is a contraction of the three tenses of I am. Okay, it's he who was, who is, and is to come. Okay, and they didn't know him as the Yehovah outside of time. We've had people send messages commenting, saying, why do you use the name Yehovah? Why is it Yehovah? Hovah means destruction. Well, the problem is you can't parse a Hebrew word like that. The way that Yehovah is correctly parsed is that it's the three forms of I am, which is why he says, I am that I am. And then he says, therefore go and tell them that Yehovah has sent you. And we'll have people say, like, well, why don't you use the word Yahweh? Okay, so I thought I would explain these things. We don't use the name Yahweh because Yahweh comes from, the only source for Yahweh is Genessis, the guy that wrote the Hebrew Chaldee lexicon. And he makes an argument for Yahweh because the Samaritans, the Sumerians were heard to have used the name Yahweh. The problem with that is they had a temple which was supposed to be a temple to Yehovah. They had another unauthorized temple, but it became a temple to Jupiter. And Jupiter in that language is Yahweh Pater. Yahweh Pater. So when they were heard to speak the name Yahweh, we've got Yahweh Pater, which can be interpreted as Father Yahweh. Pater, as in paternal. Yahweh Pater is not Father Yahweh, it's Jupiter. So we don't use the name Yahweh either because there's just no source for the name Yahweh. Similarly, the name Yahuwah. Okay, Yahuwah. Yahuwah is actually a word that's been made up recently. We've got no kind of historical record of it existing as a word for one really good reason. In Hebrew, Yahuwah isn't a word that you can write. You can't have the two vowels next to each other like that. It's just not a valid Hebrew word. People think that it has to be Yahoo something because the prophets all have Yahoo in their name. Well, that's just not actually correct. You know, we've got the name Elijah written as Eliyah as well as Eliyahu, and when you have Yahoo on the end of names, oftentimes you'll find them written elsewhere with just Yah on the end. We'll see an example later on, but that's not even a good argument for why that would have to be part of his name anyway. We know that Yah refers to Yah. It doesn't refer to the Tetragrammaton. It refers to his poetic name, if you like, that's written throughout the scriptures, which is Yah. So we don't use any of those. We use Yehovah because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of documents which have his name with all of the vowel points in. You don't find that with Yahweh. You'll never find Yahweh written down anywhere. You never find Yahuwah written down anywhere. And we have seen the 119 Ministries teaching on the name Yehovah. We watched it, and in fact, when we watched it, we thought, wow, that's really interesting information. We might have to change the name that we use here. But further investigation into their claims has yielded that there's a greater context to understand the things that they say in. The letter Vav being translated, or being in fact a war instead of a Vav. There's great arguments for it, but again, if you understand the greater context of the arguments, you just get a bit deeper knowledge of those things. And it's actually the other way around, that the Vav preceded the war. But we are familiar with all of these arguments, and we've looked into all these things. So for anyone thinking, why are they using this stupid name? Have they not seen the 119 Ministries video? We have, and we're using the name that we have a massive historical record. We're going to see a place mentioned in this Torah portion called YHVH. Okay, people say that the vowel pointings are not in his name, but when his name makes up part of a place name, the vowel pointings are all in place. So if you read the Hebrew, the vowel pointings are all there for YHVH, or Jehovah Jireh as people call it. So absolutely everything points to the fact that his name is Yehovah. Yahweh is part of Yahweh Pater, Jupiter. Yahuwah is a word that has only come into existence recently, and it's kind of something that the Hebrew roots movement have come up with. It's not even a valid Hebrew word. So just some great understanding there. But they didn't know him as YHVH. And this is interesting because you can see this in this interaction with Sarah. You think, if you know that's YHVH, how are you possibly thinking that you can say to him, I didn't laugh? Because they didn't understand who he was. Okay, they didn't know him as the one who was, who is, and is to come, one who's outside of time. They understood him as this incredibly powerful God, because you've got to think, how had they encountered him? All of the times that they'd encountered him up until this point revealed nothing of the fact that he would know you did laugh. Okay, she's learning here on the fly who he is. The men rose up from there and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to send them away. And YHVH said, am I concealing from Abraham what I am doing? Amos 3:7 says, the Master YHVH does no matter unless he reveals his secret to his servants, the prophets. Okay, who is Abraham? He's his servant, and as we'll see later in the Torah portion, he is a prophet. Okay, that's who Abraham is. He is one of his servants, the prophets. Since Abraham certainly becomes a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth have been blessed in him. Again, we've got this future perfect tense used here. All the nations of the earth have been blessed in him. This is who I am. I'm YHVH. The future is known to me. The future's already happened, if you like, because I'm the one who was, who is, and is to come. I am. Okay. For I have known him, that he commands his children and his household after him, and they have guarded the way of YHVH to do righteousness and justice, that YHVH may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. So he says, I've known him. Okay, you think in future perfect tense, I have known him, which is interesting. Romans 8:29 says, those whom he knew beforehand. This is what it is to be known of YHVH. It's to be foreknown by him. He says, I've known Abraham. Abraham is not going to be one of the ones to whom Yeshua says, I never knew you. Okay, they're all going to come to him and say, look at all these amazing works we did. And he's just going to say, you're not one of the chosen. I never knew you. And YHVH said, because the outcry against Sodom and Amorah is great, and because their sin is very heavy, I'm going down now to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me, and if not, I know. So the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom, but YHVH still stood before Abraham. I think this is very interesting because we've got this idea of who YHVH is, but when they were building the Tower of Babel, and here he says, I'm going to go down to the earth and I'm going to have a look. Okay, so it's something that's worth considering. I don't really know what to make from that personally, but again, we've got to take away what we think we know about YHVH, and we've got to learn who he is from what we read. Interesting here where it says YHVH still stood before Abraham. This is what it says in the Masoretic text. And in the kind of the rabbinical traditions in Judaism, they put these people, they put Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov up on a pedestal as if they were sinless, and they're revered like YHVH. They say when Abraham has this interchange with him about, will you do it for this many people and this many people, they say that Abraham was actually bargaining down YHVH, that he was changing YHVH's opinion on it. That it was Abraham who was directing all of this, and they put the power in the hands of men much more. They say that the Torah is not in heaven, means that it's not for YHVH to have given us a concrete Torah, that now it's in the hands of men and men can change it, and this is where you get rabbinical authority to change the word from. But in the Masoretic text, it says YHVH still stood before Abraham. In the Septuagint, it says Abraham was still standing before Yehovah, which is just a different dynamic, isn't it? Abraham standing before Yehovah, or Yehovah was standing before Abraham. And there's actually something that's still in the Masoretic text that we'll see later, which confirms that it was Abraham standing before Yehovah, not the other way around. Abraham drew near and said, "Would you also destroy the righteous with the wrong?" And again, he's learning who Yehovah is here, and he starts to bargain him down. "Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that were in it? Far be it from you to act in this way, to slay the righteous with the wrong, so that the righteous should be as the wrong. Far be it from you. Does the judge of all the earth not do right?" Again, he's learning who he is. He's not commanding Yehovah and how Yehovah sees things. He's learning who he is, and he's saying, "You're the judge of all the earth. You are El Shaddai. Are you going to do something that is wrong? You're going to slay the righteous?" And Yehovah says, "If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I shall spare it for all the place for their sakes." And Abraham answered and said, "Look, please, I who am but dust and ashes have taken it upon myself to speak to Yehovah. Suppose there are 5 less than the 50 righteous. Would you destroy all of the city for the lack of 5? And he said, "If I find there 45, I destroy not." And he spoke to him yet again and said, "Suppose there are found 40. And he said, "I do not because of the 40. And he said, "Please let Yehovah not be displeased, and I speak. Suppose there are found 30. And he said, "I do not if I find 30 there." He said, please, I've taken it upon myself to speak to Yehovah. Suppose there are found 20. And he said, "I do not destroy for the sake of 20. And he said, "Please let not Yehovah be displeased, and I will speak only this time. Suppose there are found 10. And he said, "I do not destroy for the sake of 10. So Abraham's learning who he is. We're going to learn more of who Yehovah is when he actually goes to Sodom and Amorah, because he doesn't destroy it for 4 people. In fact, Lot is the only one which is described in the scriptures as righteous. So it's not 10, that wasn't the limit. Abraham's just said to him, "Look, I'm not going to ask you anymore. What about 10 people?" And it's perhaps true that Abraham thought that they were going to find 10 righteous there because of Lot's family, which we'll see. But Yehovah will not destroy for the sake of the righteous, and we're going to see him tell us that. Again, I appeared to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov as El Shaddai, and by my name, Yehovah, I have not been known to them. So when we're seeing these interactions, we have to bear in mind that they are just learning who he is. They had the concept of who he is. They appreciated some of who he was, but they didn't know who he was like we know who he is. Then Yehovah went away as soon as he had ended speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. And we're not going to see Yehovah again until Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed. The 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening. So there were 3 of them. 2 of them went off, and these are the 2 that we see here. Yehovah stayed with Abraham, and we'll see him again shortly. The 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. And when Lot saw them, he rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face towards the ground. And he said, "Look, please, my masters, turn into your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet, and rise early and go your way." Which I think is a weird thing for him to have said to them. I don't really understand the context of what's going on here. Maybe he was trying to tell them, "I'm not going to trouble you or keep you up." But the idea of wash your feet, come inside, rise early, and get on your way just reads weird to me. And they said, "No, but let us spend the night in the open square." And he urged them strongly, and they turned into him and came into his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. And the word feast there is mishta. Because when I read this, I thought, that's weird, isn't it? He made them a feast when they'd come in the evening, and also baked unleavened bread. The unleavened bread isn't part of the feast. I just thought that's weird. So I looked at the word mishta, and it can mean a feast, like a big spread of food, but it can also mean a drink, which is what I probably think that this What I think this probably means, he made them a drink and baked them unleavened bread and they ate. I think that's probably more likely than he made them a feast, but maybe he did. Maybe he appreciated who they were. Before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, all the people from every part surrounded the house. And they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us and let us know them. We want to have sex with these men." And bear in mind who this is. Okay, the men of the city, both old and young, all the people from every part, and they all come with this request. So Lot went out to them through the doorway and shut the door behind him and said, "Please, my brothers, do not do evil. Look, please, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Please let me bring them out to you and do to them as you wish. Only do no deed to these men, because they've come under the shadow of my roof." And there's an idea that the reason that he was doing this was because he knew that they were all homosexuals and it would enrage them, and then they would turn their attention to him, which is what ends up happening. But I think we have to be very careful when we're saying this is why this happened, this is what Lot was thinking, this is what he was trying to do, because we're not actually told explicitly. But they said, "Stand back." And they said, "This one came in to sojourn, and should he always judge? Now we're going to treat you worse than them." So you can see where this idea comes in. Should he always judge, as in he's judging us for being gay. But you could also interpret it and say, well, he was sitting in the gate, which is where people would sit to judge. And when people have authority, people tend to become jealous of them, and they tend to dislike them. And kind of like, "Oh, it's that guy who set himself up as a judge. He only came in here to sojourn, and now he's the judge. Now we're going to treat you worse than them." They pressed hard against the man Lot and came near to break down the door. But the men reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, and they wearied themselves to find the door. And the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here, a son-in-law, and your sons and your daughters, and whomever you have in the city? Bring them out of this place, for we are going to destroy this place, because the cry against them is grown great before the face of YHVH, and YHVH has sent us to destroy it." Lot went out to speak with his sons-in-law who had married his daughters and said, "Get up, get out of this place, for YHVH is going to destroy this city." But to his sons-in-law he seemed to be as one joking. So we know that Lot has 2 daughters. There's him, there's his wife. Then we know that he has other daughters and he has sons-in-law. So it's actually possible that he had 3 daughters and 3 sons-in-law, and that was 10 people. And Abraham, when he said, "Would you destroy it for the sake of 10, was thinking of these people. But when he goes to speak to them, he seemed to be as one joking, which kind of tells us a little bit about where they were at, spiritually speaking. 1 Corinthians 2 verse 14 says, the natural man does not receive the matters of the Spirit of Elohim, for they are foolishness to him, and he is unable to know them. They're foolishness to him. And this is the way when we interact with people, whether they be Torah keepers, who are not people just following by faith, they're kind of following by works, and I think that I should be doing this and I'm going to do it, and I'm not sure that I can do that. That's a bit hard. People who are doing it by works, and then people who are doing it by faith. But the natural man does not receive the matters of the Spirit of Elohim, and their foolishness to him. He cannot know them, he cannot understand them. When morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, "Get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." Okay, so what I want you to remember from this passage is that morning dawned when they were with Lot and his family in Lot's house. Okay? That's when morning dawns. And while he loitered, the men took hold of his hand and his wife's hand and the hands of his 2 daughters, Yehovah having compassion on him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. And it came to be when they brought them outside that he said, escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be consumed. And Lot said to them, oh no, Yehovah, look please, your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have increased your kindness which you've shown me by saving my life. But I am unable to escape to the mountains, lest calamity overtake me and I die. So remember, when Yehovah said to him, go to the mountains, Lot says, oh no, I can't do it. Think, where does Lot end up eventually? Where does Lot go to live? He ends up in the mountains, doesn't he? It's where Yehovah told him to go at first, but he wanted things to be different, and Yehovah is gracious and he's patient with him. Look, please, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is small. Please let me escape there. Is it not a small matter, and let my life be saved? And he said to him, look, I have favored you concerning this matter also, without overthrowing this city for which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I am not able to do any deed until you arrive there. Okay, it's interesting, isn't it? Abraham's learning who he is. Would you destroy it for the sake of 50 righteous? No, I wouldn't. He says to Lot, you need to leave this place because I'm going to destroy it. I can't destroy it until you leave. So the name of the city was called Zoar. The sun had risen upon the earth when Lot entered Zoar. Okay, so when did morning dawn? Morning dawned when they were in Lot's house. When did the sun rise? The sun rose on the earth when they entered Zoar, however long that was afterwards, an hour and a half, 2 hours afterwards. So the idea that the day starts when dawn comes is just scripturally inaccurate, because the morning dawns before the sun rises. Okay, there's no way that you can get around that. Yehovah rained sulfur and fire on Sodom and Amorah from Yehovah out of the heavens. That's an interesting statement, isn't it? Yehovah rained sulfur and fire on Sodom and Amorah from Yehovah out of the heavens. It's easy to understand though, isn't it? Because of what we were looking at before. Yehovah rained fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from Yehovah in the heavens. The idea that there's a Yehovah on the earth and there's a Yehovah in the heavens is something that we find in this narrative as well. So he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him and she became a post of salt. And we'll come back in the second part. Okay, so this is how we know that it wasn't Yehovah standing before Abraham, it was Abraham standing before Yehovah. And Abraham arose early in the morning and went to the place where he had stood before Yehovah. So I don't know why the Masoretic text is different. I can have a stab at why I think that it might be. But it seems to me like this is like they changed one thing and forgot to change it so that it was consistent throughout the narrative. That's what it seems like to me. He looked towards Sodom and Amorah and towards all the land of the plain, and he looked and saw the smoke of the land which went up like the smoke of a furnace. Thus it came to be when Elohim destroyed the cities of the plain, that Elohim remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had dwelt. And Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountains. So Yehovah tells him, go to the mountains. And he's like, oh, I'm not sure. Can't I just go to the city? Like, okay, yeah, go to the city. And now you're in the mountains, like I knew. And his 2 daughters were with him, for he was afraid to dwell in Zoar. He was afraid to dwell in the mountains. He was afraid to dwell in Zoar. He and his 2 daughters dwelt in a cave. The firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, and there is no man on the earth to come into us, as is the way of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine and lie with him, so that we preserve the seed of our father. So again we see the scriptural teaching of kind of being drunk being a bad thing and you losing your inhibitions. We see it with Noah, and we see that is the teaching in Scripture. The kings, the physical rulers on the earth, were not allowed to drink wine in case they forgot the Torah, in case they did. The justice that they brought about was not good because they've been drinking wine. Jeremiah 37. This is interesting, okay? As I said, Yehovah knew where he was going to end up. That's where he told him to go in the first place. That's where he ends up. We see something similar in this narrative from Jeremiah. It says, King Zekiyahu, son of Yoshiyahu, reigned instead of Konyahu, son of Jehoiakim, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel, sent up to reign in the land of Yehudah. But neither he nor his servants nor the people of the land had listened to the voice of Yehovah, which he spoke by the prophet Yirmiyahu. And Zekiyahu, the king, sent Yehuchal, son of Shelemiah. Okay, this is the example I'm going to show you of where Yah and Yahu change between them. Remember, this guy's called Shelemiah here. And the priest Zephaniah, son of Maaseiah, to the prophet Yirmiyahu, saying, please pray to Yehovah our Elohim for us. And you can see this, can't you? You can see their names. Some of them end Yahu, some of them end in Yah, because it's not Yahu that's important. It's that Yah is a part of the name. Now Yirmiyahu was still coming and going among the people, for they had not yet put him in prison. Actually, if you look up Yirmiyahu on Blue Letter Bible, and you look at the word that it has for his name, it is in fact Yirmiah. But they had not yet put him in prison. Meanwhile, Pharaoh's army had set out from Mitzrayim, and when the Chaldeans who were besieging Jerusalem heard news of them, they withdrew from Jerusalem. And the word of Yehovah came to Yirmiyahu the prophet, saying, thus said Yehovah the Elohim of Yisrael, say this to the king of Yehudah, who sent you to inquire of me. See, Pharaoh's army, which has come up to help you, shall turn back to Mitzrayim, to their own land. Okay, so they're not obeying according to the word. They're saying things like, oh, Pharaoh's army's come up, it's going to help us, everything's actually going to be okay. And he says, go and say this to the king of Judah, who, as we will see, is in Benjamin. And the Chaldeans shall return and fight against this city and take it and burn it with fire. Thus said Yehovah, do not deceive yourselves, saying the Chaldeans shall go away from us, for they do not go. For though you had smitten the entire army of the Chaldeans who are fighting against you, and there remained only wounded men among them, they would get up, each man in his tent, and burn the city with fire. It doesn't matter how good the situation looks like it's going to turn out. I've told you it's not going to turn out good. If there were only wounded men, they would come and burn the city with fire. And it came to be when the army of the Chaldeans left the siege of Jerusalem for fear of Pharaoh's army, the Yirmiyahu who went out of Jerusalem to go into the land of Benjamin to receive his portion there in the midst of the people. Okay, and this actually turns out to be where the king of Judah is. So this is what he's on his way to do, to deliver this to the king of Judah. Well, I think that people do this quite often, this idea of what the king's doing here. They'll know that they're in disobedience, but they'll be thinking, what's the problem? Everything seems to be going pretty good. This looks like it's going good. This looks like it's going good. But Yehovah has told us it will not work out well for you if you do not obey. And it came to be, as he was in the gate of Benjamin, a master of the guard was there, whose name was Uriah, son of Shelemiah. So he's called Shelemiah again there, son of Hananiah. And he seized Yirmiyahu the prophet, saying, you are deserting to the Chaldeans. So he's off on his way to do what Yehovah has told him. And now look, the master of the guard has arrested him. Yirmiyahu said, it's a lie, I'm not deserting to the Chaldeans. But he did not listen to him, and Uriah seized Yirmiyahu and brought him to the heads. And the heads were wroth with Yirmiyahu and smote him and put him in prison in the house of Jehonathan the scribe, for they had made that for a prison. When Yirmiyahu had entered into the dungeon and into the cells, then Yirmiyahu remained there many days. He's thinking, I imagine, I'm doing what Yehovah has told me to do, and now I've got arrested. Maybe he's thinking, what have I done wrong? Maybe I've done something wrong. Zedekiah, the king, sent and took him out, and the king asked him secretly in his house and said, is there any word from Yehovah? And Yirmiyahu said, there is. He said, you are given into the hand of the king of Babel. And Yirmiyahu said to Zedekiah the king, what have I sinned against you and against your servants and against this people that you've put me into prison? Where are your prophets who prophesied to you, saying, the king of Babel is not coming against you or against this land? But now, please hear, O my master the king. Please let my petition be accepted before you, and do not make me return to the house of Jehonathan the scribe, lest I die there. Zedekiah the king then gave orders for Yirmiyahu to be placed in the court of the guard, and that they should give him daily a piece of bread from the baker's street until all the bread in the city was gone. So Yirmiyahu remained in the court of the guard. So at this time, when all the people were starving in the city and they were all dying of hunger, eating their children, all sorts of stuff was going on, Jeremiah, because he was in what he may have perceived to be a bad situation at first. I mean, let's hope not. Maybe he was like, oh, I'm just going to trust Yehovah. Well, he finds himself in a situation that most people would have thought of as a bad situation. It ends up that that's how Yehovah sustains him through it, because he goes and he does what Yehovah has said to do. In chapter 38, it says, Shephatiah, son of Matan, and Gadaliahu, son of Pashur, and Yuchal, son of Shelemiyahu. Okay, so it's been Shelemiah, now it's Shelemiyahu, and you'll find that all the way through the scriptures. So don't pay attention to people saying that Yahoo is part of the name of Yehovah. And Pashur, son of Malchiah, heard the words which Yirmiyahu had spoken to all the people, saying, thus said Yehovah, he who remains in this city shall die by the sword, by scarcity of food, and by pestilence. But whoever goes over to the Chaldeans shall live, and his life shall be as a prize to him, and he shall live. Okay, so you stay in the city, you're going to die. Go over to the Chaldeans, which maybe you're scared of doing, then you will live. Thus said Yehovah, this city is certainly given into the hand of the king of Babel's army, and he shall take it. Now they're looking at the situation, and maybe it seems like they're going to be rescued by Pharaoh's army, or it seems like the Chaldeans are going to go away, or whatever, but the ones who paid heed to this and didn't lean on their own understanding and look at their situation were the ones who would benefit. Then the king said to the head said to the king, please let this man be put to death, because he is weakening the hands of the men of battle who are left in this city, and the hands of all the people by speaking such words to them. Okay, this man who has come speaking the words of Yehovah, he's actually doing harm. He's making the people doubt themselves or whatever. For this man does not seek the peace of this people, but the evil. And this is often how you will be received if you come and speak the words of Yehovah to people who think and act according to what their eyes tell them. Zedekiah the king said, look, he is in your hand, for the king is unable to do any matter against you. And they took Yirmiyahu and threw him into the dungeon of Malchiah the king's son, which was in the court of the guard. And they let Yirmiyahu down with ropes, and in the dungeon there was no water but mud. So Yirmiyahu sank in the mud. And Eved-Melech, the Cushite, one of the eunuchs who was in the king's house, heard that they put Yirmiyahu in the dungeon, and the king was sitting at the gate of Benjamin. Okay, so we know this is where Yirmiyahu was going. And Eved-Melech, came from the king's house and spoke to the king, saying, "My master the king, these men have done evil in all that they've done to Yirmiyahu the prophet, whom they've thrown into the dungeon, and he is likely to die from hunger in the place where he is, for there is no more bread in the city." And the king commanded Ebed-melech the Cushite, saying, "Take 30 men from here with you, lift Yirmiyahu the prophet out of the dungeon before he dies." So Ebed-melech took the men with him and went into the house of the king under the treasury, took old clothes and old rags from there, and they let them down by ropes into the dungeon to Yirmiyahu. And Ebed-melech the Cushite said to Yirmiyahu, "Please put these old clothes and rags under your armpits, under the ropes." And Yirmiyahu did so, and they pulled Yirmiyahu up with ropes, lifted him out of the dungeon, and Yirmiyahu remained in the court of the guard. Then Zikkiyahu the king sent and had Yirmiyahu the prophet brought to him at the third entrance of the house of Yehovah. And the king said to Yirmiyahu, "I am asking you a matter. Do not hide the matter from me." Yirmiyahu said to Zikkiyahu, "If I declare it to you, shall you not put me to death? And if I give you advice, you shall not listen to me." Zikkiyahu the king swore secretly to Yirmiyahu, saying, "As Yehovah lives, who made us this life, I do not put you to death, nor do I give you into the hands of these men who seek your life." Yirmiyahu said to Zikkiyahu, "Thus said Yehovah, the Elohim Zevaot, the Elohim of Yisrael, if you do indeed surrender to the heads of the king of Bavel, then your king shall live in this city, not be burned with fire, and you and your house shall live. But if you do not surrender to the heads of the king of Bavel, then this city shall be given into the hand of the Chaldeans, and they shall burn it with fire, and you shall not escape from their hand." Then Zikkiyahu the king said to Yirmiyahu, "I'm afraid of the Yehudim who have gone over to the Chaldeans, lest they give me into their hand and they maltreat me." So all the way sitting through, you see these things where, do this. This is what Yehovah said to do. "Oh no, I'm afraid to do this, I'm afraid to do this." Yirmiyahu said, "They shall not hand you over. Please obey the voice of Yehovah which I speak to you, and let it be well with you, and your life be spared." This is the exact same situation that everyone's in today, because everyone's going to have things in their life that when it comes to, this is what the word says to do, you're going to be scared to do those things, and you have a decision then. Am I going to do them and let my life be good, or am I going to go according to my fear? And then, Yehovah's aims are not going to be thwarted by us, but it will end badly for us, just like Lot. He told him to go to the mountains, and he said, "Oh, I'm afraid to go to the mountains." And he said, "I'm going to go to the city instead." He said, "Okay, go to the city." And he ends up in the mountains anyway, where Yehovah's will, so to speak, is not going to be thwarted by these things. But if you refuse to surrender, this is the word that Yehovah has shown me, then see, all the women who are left in the king of Yehudah's house shall be surrendered to the heads of the king of Bavel. And see, they are saying, your close friends have set upon you and prevailed against you. Your feet have sunk in the mire, and they have turned away. And they are going to surrender all your wives and children to the Chaldeans, and you yourself shall not escape from their hand, but be taken by the hand of the king of Bavel, and this city be burned with fire. And Zikkiyahu said to Yirmiyahu, "Let no one know of these words, and you shall not die. But if the heads hear that I have spoken with you, and they come to you and say to you, 'Declare to us now what you've said to the king, and also what the king said to you. Do not hide it from us, and we do not put you to death,' then you shall say to them, 'I presented my petition before the king, not to send me back to the house of Jehonathan to die there.' And all the heads came to Yirmiyahu and asked him, and he informed them according to all these words that the king had commanded them. And they said no more to him, for the matter was not heard. So Yirmiyahu remained in the court of the guard until the day that Yerushalayim was taken, and was there when Yerushalayim was taken." So he didn't listen to him. They came, and Jerusalem was taken by the king of Bavel. Jeremiah was in this place, in the court of the guard. Jeremiah 39, we hear this is Jeremiah's end in this situation. And Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Bavel, gave an order concerning Yirmiyahu to Nebuzaradan, chief of the guard, saying, "Take him and look after him, and do no harm whatsoever to him, but do to him even as he shall speak to you." So throughout all of these situations, all of these things which wouldn't have been pleasant things to be going through. The outcome of it was Yehovah was with him in all of it, and it turned out for his good because he trusted Yehovah and he followed what he was told. Psalm 33, 8-12 says, "Let all the earth fear Yehovah, let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spoke and it came to be, he commanded and it stood fast. Yehovah brings the counsel of the nations to naught, he thwarts the plans of the people." This is what we see him doing here. They're looking at things like Pharaoh's army, the army of the Chaldeans. What are they doing? And they should be listening to the word of Yehovah, knowing that that is what is going to stand. The counsel of Yehovah stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose Elohim is Yehovah, the people whom he has chosen as his own inheritance, because they're the people for whom all of these matters are going to work out for good. 2 Corinthians 1, 3-10 says, "Blessed be the Elohim and Father of our Master Yeshua Messiah, the Father of compassion and the Elohim of all comfort." And that word comfort there is the same root as we have the Comforter will be sent to you. The Elohim of all comfort. And it's interesting with the Comforter. As here we've got the Father and Master of Yeshua Messiah, the Father of compassion, the Elohim of all comfort. So he's the Comforter. We know the Holy Spirit is the Comforter in Scripture. And rabbinical teaching on the Messiah that actually comes from the Scriptures, comes from the phrase the Comforter. They call Mashiach. They call Mashiach ben Yosef, as they see it. They call him the Comforter also. So all three are given the title of the Comforter. He's comforting us in all our pressure, enabling us to comfort those who are in every pressure. So that's an interesting perspective on why we go through trials, while we go through things in our life. It enables us to counsel and comfort people who are also going through pressure through the comfort which we ourselves are comforted by Elohim. So we experience comfort from Elohim when we go through these things, and then we can minister to others. Because as the sufferings of Messiah overflow in us, so our comfort also overflows through Messiah, because they go hand in hand. One begets the other. And if we suffer pressure, it is for your comfort and salvation, being worked out and enduring the same sufferings which we also suffer. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort and salvation. So the pressure begets the comfort, and each of them beget comfort and salvation, and the ability to comfort others who are going through these things. And our expectation for you is steadfast, because we know that as you are sharing in the sufferings, so also in the comfort. For we do not wish you to be ignorant, brothers, of our pressure which came to us in Asia, that we were weighed down exceedingly beyond ability, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, we had the sentence of death in ourselves, that we should not trust in ourselves, but in Elohim, who raises the dead. So they were put in a situation where they had the death sentence passed on them. But what did that bring about? That they did not trust in themselves, but their trust then can only be in Elohim. You think of people who've been going through sickness recently, myself. Okay, these things are true, because where does your focus go to when you do not have trust in yourself? You don't know what your own future is. Where do you go? You go to Elohim. Elohim comforts you, and it allows you to comfort others. Who rescued us from so great a death, and does rescue, in whom we trust that he should still rescue us. Okay, so he's talking about the physical death with the death penalty, but he's rescued us from the death of the soul, in whom we trust that he shall still rescue us. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he was not aware of it when she lay down or when she arose. And it came to be on the next day that the firstborn said to the younger, "See, I lay with my father last night. Let us make him drink wine tonight as well, and you go in and lie with him, so that we keep the seed of our father." So they made their father drink wine that night as well, and the younger arose and lay with him, and he was not aware of it when she lay down when she arose. Thus both the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. And the younger also bore a son, his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the children of Ammon to this day. So throughout the book of Genesis, we're going to see children that came about by works, so to speak, by the will of the people doing what they thought was the right thing to do. Okay, we're going to see it. We've seen it with Ishmael. Okay, we're going to see it, in fact, in this Torah portion, Ishmael, with Yitzchak. Yitzchak was promised, and Abraham takes it upon himself for him to sleep with Hagar and for a child to come because of that, because he was trying to fulfill the promises of Elohim. Here again we see these children that come about that end up causing trouble in the world because they were begotten because of the works of the flesh. Romans 9:6-18 talks of this. It says, however, it's not as though the word of Elohim has failed. For they are not all Yisrael who are of Yisrael. So, okay, Yisrael, the guy, everyone who's of him is not Yisrael, Yehovah's people in Yehovah's eyes. Neither are they all children because they are the seed of Abraham, but in Yitzchak your seed shall be called. Okay, and Charlie went through the scripture in John 8 recently where they said, we're the seed of Abraham. He said, now if you are of Abraham, you do the works of Abraham. That is, those who are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of Elohim, but the children of the promise are reckoned as the seed. For this is the word of promise, at this time I shall come, and Sarah shall have a son. And not only so, but Rivkah, having conceived by one, our father Yitzchak, yet before they were born or had done any good or evil, in order that the purpose of Elohim according to choice might stand, not of works, but of him who calls. Okay, so it's the choice of Elohim before they were born, before they'd done any good or evil. It was said to her, the greater shall serve the lesser. It's been written, Yaakov I've loved, but Esav I've hated. And we'll look at Esav, who Esav is, spiritually speaking, in a couple of weeks. What then shall we say? Is there unrighteousness with Elohim? Let it not be. For he says to Moshe, I shall favor whomever I favor, and I shall have compassion on whomever I have compassion. So then it is not of him who is wishing, nor of him who is running, but of Elohim who shows favor. That's an interesting thing for us to come to terms with, because there are loads of people who will say, we're Torah keepers, we do the things of the Torah. But like I said before, they do them by works. They do them like, oh yeah, the Torah, that's what we're supposed to do if we follow Elohim. They don't do it by faith. It's not just kind of an instinctual, of course, this is what the word says, I'm going to do it. There's always some kind of struggle, some kind of problem why they can't do it. Okay, so it's not of him who is wishing, nor of him who is running, but it's of Elohim who shows favor. So them doing these works and being like, we're going to do the Torah, we're going to be the ones who are saved, they can't do it. That's why he turns around and says to these people, depart from me, I never knew you. You were not foreknown to me. You weren't the chosen. You came, you did many wonderful works in my name, but I never knew you. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this same purpose I have raised you up, to show my power in you, and that my name be declared in all the earth. So then he favors whom he wishes, and he hardens whom he wishes. Okay, and he knew the people that were going to respond to him. He knew the people who were of faith that were just going to do these things, and he chose them. And people can come along and be Torah keepers as much as they want, but it's Elohim who chooses. Numbers 22 verse 4, okay, the Moabites were the children of one of the daughters. Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this company is licking up all that is around us as an ox licks up the grass. Now Balak, son of Zippor, was king of the Moabites. at that time. So these people turn out to be enemies to the Israelites. But YHVH said to them, don't distress Moab, nor stir yourself up against them in battle, for I do not give you any of their land as a possession, because I've given Ar to the descendants of Lot as a possession. So YHVH knows what he's bringing about. He knows the reasons that he's brought it about. And he says to us to not interfere in that, to leave certain things to him, us to just get on with living our lives according to righteousness. Abraham set out from there to the land of the south and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur and dwelt in Gerar. And Abraham said concerning Sarai's wife, she is my sister, and Avimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarai. But Elohim came to Avimelech in a dream by night and said to him, see, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife. However, Avimelech had not come near her, and he said, YHVH, would you slay a righteous nation also? It's like Abraham when he encounters YHVH. Did he not say to me, she is my sister? And she even herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and in the innocence of my hands, I have done this. And Elohim said to him in a dream, yea, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart, and so I kept you from sinning against me. For this reason, I did not let you touch her. And now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and let him pray for you, and you live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall certainly die, you and all that are yours. And there's a lot in this which is interesting. If we consider what we looked at a couple of weeks ago, even as one man, through one man, sin did enter into the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. For until the Torah, sin was in the world, but sin is not reckoned when there is no Torah. But death reigned from Adam until Moshe, even over those who had not sinned according to the likeness of the transgression of Adam. So Adam knew what he was doing when he sinned. When there's no Torah, the people aren't held accountable in the same way, but death is going to spread to all men. He says to him, doesn't he? He says, you are a dead man because you have done this. Okay, we go back to the scripture. He says, you're a dead man because the woman whom you've taken. Okay, and he says, would you slay somebody righteous? I did it in the integrity of my heart. Why did he do it? He did it because Abraham had deceived him. But it's interesting, going back to Adam, Abraham had deceived him like the serpent deceived Eve. He had deceived him by telling him a truth. And then what do we have YHVH saying? He says, if you do not return her, know that you shall certainly die. That's the exact phrase, you shall surely die, you shall certainly die. Just the different translation. Okay, if you don't return, I know that you'll certainly die, because what's happened now, okay, he has told him what the Torah is on this matter. He says, okay, you did it in the integrity of your heart up until this point, but now you know the Torah. And this is what I'm saying. If you do this, you shall certainly die. So we've got an interesting mirror with what is happening with Adam and Eve. We've got the same elements present there with Avimelech. So Avimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and spoke all these words in their hearing. And the men were greatly frightened. And Avimelech called Abraham and said to him, what have you done to us? And what have I sinned against you that you've brought upon me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done matters to me that should not be done. And Avimelech said to Abraham, what did you see that you have done this matter? And the word see is from ra'ah, from where we get ra'eh, and it means not only to see, like I can see that there, but it also means to understand. What have you seen that you've done this matter? And this is how Abraham responds. He says, only because I said to myself, the fear of Elohim is not in this place, and they shall kill me for the sake of my wife. So this is Abraham's understanding of the situation. It's not necessarily even that the fear of Elohim wasn't in this place. It's just that's what Abraham thought. Again, he's leaning on his own understanding. He's going by the sight of his eyes to work things out rather than doing what is right. And yet she is truly my sister. Again, he deceives, but he deceives through telling the truth. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And it came to be when Elohim caused me to wander from my father's house that I said to her, this is your kindness that you should do to me. In every place, wherever we go, saith me, he is my brother. Then Abimelech took sheep and cattle and male and female servants and gave them to Abraham, and he returned Sarah's wife to him. And Abimelech said, see, my land is before you. Dwell wherever it is good in your eyes. This is a phrase that stuck out to me recently as well, to do whatever is good in your eyes. Obviously, we have the instructions of YHVH, so to do what is good in our eyes is to do what is good according to his word. And it's almost like this is how we are to live our lives. Do what is good in your eyes, as long as you know that for all these things you will be brought into judgment. And to Sarah he said, see, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. See, it is to you a covering of eyes before all who are with you, and before all others, and you are cleared before everyone. And it struck me as a weird phrase, so I checked it in the Septuagint. And it says, and to Sarah he said, behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Those shall be to thee for the price of thy countenance, it says here. Good example of Greek translations in the Septuagint telling us a little bit more about what we're reading there. What is somebody's countenance? Okay, in the Greek this word is face or countenance. It's the Hebrew word for face or countenance. It's panim, isn't it? Okay, so the price of thy countenance could be a Greek rendition or an English rendition of a Greek rendition of the price of your panim, which would be the price of your presence. Almost like, well, you've been away from your husband for this time, and this will be the price of your presence. And to all the women who are with you, and speak the truth in all things. Again, I think that change is interesting because they do, in rabbinical Judaism, they do kind of elevate these people, Sarah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And they elevate them to kind of like a sinless status. But in the Greek, it's like Sarah is rebuked here and told, speak the truth in all things. And Abraham prayed to Elohim, and Elohim healed Abimelech and his wife and his female servants, so they bore children. For YHVH had closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. And we've commented before on the fact that there's something in that Elohim said, go to Abraham and he will pray for you and you will be healed. But there's something for us in this as well. There's something that we are to do which mirrors exactly this. Is any of you suffering evil? Let him pray. Is anyone in good spirits? Let him sing psalms. Is anyone among you sick? Let him call for the elders of the assembly and let them pray over him, having anointed him with oil in the name of the Master. So the instruction that we're given for when we are sick is the same as Abimelech was given. Go to Abraham. He's a prophet. He will pray for you, and then you'll be healed. Because it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? It's weird. We're told, go to the elders of the church, okay? The elders of the assembly, let them pray over you. So I think that this is something that we should really be mindful of incorporating, because we do this, but we don't do it in all cases. Okay, this is an instruction from Scripture, and it's actually something which is present in the Torah. People often think that, they question the New Testament because they say, where is that in the Torah? They don't realize that these things are right there all along because they don't have that real strong foundation in the Torah. Okay, we'll come back in the third part, and what we're going to look at is Yitzchak. Look at Yishmael and Yitzchak. Okay, so YHVH visited Sarah as he had said, and YHVH did for Sarah as he had spoken. So if the Septuagint translation is correct, and he says, I'll come back at this appointed time to the hour, then he came and he did that. So Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the appointed time of which Elohim had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Yitzchak. I want to look at the birth of Yeshua. So there's obvious parallels. You know, the barren woman bore a child. You know, it's a supernatural intervention. And in fact, in this account of the birth of Yeshua, parallels are drawn. Okay, it's Elisheva, who was too old to bear, one of Miriam's relatives. It says, and in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by Elohim to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a maiden engaged to a man whose name was Yosef of the house of David, and the maiden's name was Miriam. And the angel, coming to her, said, "Greetings, favored one, the master is with you. Blessed are you among women." But she was greatly disturbed at this word and wondered what kind of greeting this was. And the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Miriam, for you have found favor with Elohim. And see, you shall conceive in your womb and shall give birth to a son." Really important. She conceived in her womb and gave birth to a son. And call his name Yeshua. He shall be great and shall be called the Son of the Most High, and Yehovah Elohim shall give him the throne of his father David. And he shall reign over the house of Yaakov forever, and there shall be no end to his reign. And Miriam said to the angel, "How shall this be, since I do not know a man?" Okay, because remember, she's going to conceive in her womb and give birth to a son. The angel answering said to her, "The set-apart spirit shall come upon you, and the power of the Most High shall overshadow you. And for that reason, the set-apart one, the Holy One born of you, shall be called Son of Elohim." That's why he's called the Son of Elohim, because Mary conceived in her womb from the Holy Spirit, from the Ruach of the Father. Okay, so there is no doubt that Yeshua was in human form because he was conceived in a human womb and given birth to, but that he is the Son of Elohim. He is Elohim in a human body. There is no doubt. This is what the scriptures tell us. Absolutely. Okay, he is the progeny of Elohim, because it was the set-apart spirit that impregnated Miriam, and then she gave birth to a man. It was Yehovah in the vessel of a man. And we saw how that can work before. Okay, he was the Word made flesh, the Word that came forth from Yehovah and was Yehovah. He was that made flesh in the vessel conceived in Miriam's womb. And see, Elisheva, your relative, she has also conceived a son in her old age, and this is now the 6th month to her, who is called barren. So we've got this parallel which is drawn, because Sarah conceived a son in her old age, and it was her who was called barren previously. So this parallel is drawn, because with Elohim, no matter shall be impossible. Again, the parallel is drawn to the account of Abraham and Sarah. In Matthew 1, we have this recorded, and it gives us some more details. It says, "But the birth of Yeshua Messiah was as follows. After his mother Miriam was engaged to Yosef, before they came together, she was found to be pregnant from the set-apart spirit." It baffles me how people can say that he was not Yehovah in the flesh when he was the progeny of the Father, impregnated by the Holy Spirit. And Yosef, her husband, being righteous and not wishing to make a show of her, had in mind to put her away secretly. And somebody asked me recently, they said, does this mean that if you're engaged to somebody and you want to separate from them, that you have to put them away and give them a bill of divorce officially? Okay, and I said to them at the time, you'd have to check these words, put her away. Is it the same words for the process of a divorce. But this doesn't mean the same thing. It's not the process of a divorce. It's not an official divorce which is happening here. It's kind of like your general words to put somebody away, but not in the sense of the 2 steps of divorce. Check that out on Blue Letter Bible anyway. But while he thought about this, see, an angel of Yehovah appeared to him in a dream, saying, Yosef, son of David, do not be afraid to take Miriam as your wife, for that which is in her was brought forth from the set-apart spirit. It was begotten of the set-apart spirit. The word yalad, we have the word toldot, those things which are brought forth from. This was the bringing forth from the set-apart spirit. And she shall give birth to a son, and you shall call his name Yeshua, which means he shall save. And then the reason that you should call him Yeshua is given plainly, for he shall save his people from their sins. Call him he shall save, because he shall save his people from their sins. Really plain. People have all sorts of confusion about this name as well. And, they'll say, why are you using the name Yeshua? Why are you not using Yehoshua or Yahushua or Yahawashi or whatever people have in their heads? But none of those things mean he shall save. They say he should be called Yehoshua because that's what Joshua was called. He wasn't called Yeshua, he was called Yehoshua. But Joshua was called Yeshua. You look at the later accounts of him in his life, the word there in Hebrew is Yeshua, which means he shall save. All of the Aramaic recordings which use the same or corresponding letters to the Hebrew letters show us that it's Yeshua. The Greek word Eusus cannot come from Yehoshua. It is a transliteration of the word Yeshua. So the Greek rendering of the Hebrew word. We know what the original Hebrew word was because we can reverse engineer it from the Greek. We can't end up at Yahawashi. We can't end up with Yahushua or Yehoshua. Well, people get these ideas in their heads. They read articles on the internet or they watch YouTube videos and then they think that they've come to some kind of understanding about Hebrew. But they don't have the wider context to know whether or not it's a valid argument which is being made. It's just a thing which someone has said, which is then perpetuated and believed. But again, all of the historical evidence shows us Yeshua. These ideas have come about more recently, just like with the name Yahuwah, which exists because people don't understand how Hebrew has to work, how the grammatical rules of Hebrew are. You should call his name he shall save, for he shall save his people from their sins. And Abraham circumcised his son Yitzchak when he was 8 days old, as Elohim had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Yitzchak was born to him. And Sarah said, Elohim has made me laugh, and everyone who hears of it laughs with me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? For I have borne him a son in his old age. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Yitzchak was weaned, which I imagine was probably a little bit too much for him on his first day on solid food. Abraham made him a great feast on the day that he was weaned. This is something that we've completely lost from our culture, but something that is celebrated in the scriptures. Okay, the day that a child is weaned, the day that a child stops breastfeeding is celebrated in the scriptures. We see here Abraham made a great feast to celebrate this day. And if you look for this word wean throughout scripture, you'll see that this is something which is constantly brought up as a cause for celebration. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Mitzrite, whom she had borne to Abraham, mocking. So she said to Abraham, drive out this female servant and her son, for the son of the female servant shall not inherit with my son, with Yitzchak. And this has spiritual connotations as well, which Paul brings out in his letter to the Galatians. In Galatians 4 it says, say to me, you who wish to be under Torah, do you not hear the Torah? Okay, if you want, whether or not you're going to make it into the kingdom to be on the basis of Torah, do you not hear the Torah? Do you not realize that you've fallen short of Yehovah's perfect standard? For it has been written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by a female servant, the other by a free woman. Okay, this is Hagar, the servant, and Sarah, the free woman. But he who is of the female servant was born according to the flesh, and he of the free woman through promise. So Abraham did this through his flesh, didn't he? He did it by the works of the flesh to bring about what he saw as Yehovah's plan. This is how it's going to be. The son of the free woman, though, came through the promise. Okay, it would have seemed to have been impossible according to the flesh. This is allegorical, for these are the 2 covenants. One indeed from Mount Sinai, which brings forth slavery, which is Hagar. What does it bring forth slavery to? Brings forth slavery to sin. Okay, not slavery to the Torah, brings forth slavery to sin, because the power of sin is the Torah. Without the Torah, there is no definition of what sin is. That doesn't mean that the Torah is sinful or that the Torah is bad. It just means that it gives us the description of what sin is. And having been given that description, now we are accountable before Elohim. So the covenant from Sinai, and Paul writes about how holy and perfect and great the law is, that brings forth slavery, because no matter how good the Torah is, all it can do for people who have sinned is show them that they need the Mashiach. For this, Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds to Yerushalayim, which now is and is in slavery with her children. So the Yerushalayim, the Jerusalem that was on the earth, okay, which now is and is in slavery to sin with her children. That's why Yeshua goes to them and says that they will be set free. And they can't understand what he means when he says that they'll be set free. But the Yerushalayim above is free, which is the mother of us all. The mother of us all is Sarah. Okay? So the Yerushalayim below that's in slavery to sin, that is Hagar. It's allegorical for Hagar. The Yerushalayim that's above and is free and is of the promise, which will be inherited by the children of the promise, that is Sarah in the allegory that we have. For it is written, rejoice, O barren, you who do not bear. Break forth and shout, you who do not have birth pains. For the deserted one has many more children than she who has a husband. I think this confuses people because they still try to fit Sarah and Hagar into what this is saying. When Sarah is the deserted one, the barren one, and she had a husband. So Hagar wasn't the only one with the husband. But what they're missing is that this is Isaiah 51. And Paul isn't saying Isaiah 51 is talking about Sarah and Hagar. He's saying both Isaiah 51 and the story of Sarah and Hagar are talking about this allegorical situation which we have. And we, brothers, as Yitzchak was, are children of promise. But as he who was born according to the flesh then persecuted him born according to the Spirit, so also now. And we get this, we see this, where those who are trying to follow Torah by the works of the flesh, who are kind of like, well, we're supposed to follow the Torah, following the Torah is good, we're going to do it, and then we'll struggle with this, and we'll struggle with that, and we'll just never quite get to being obedient. We're never quite going to be doing the Torah, although, we do talk about doing the Torah and how great it is. They're not doing it by faith, and they will persecute those who do it by faith, just as Ishmael persecuted Yitzchak. But what does the scripture say? Cast out the female servant and her son, for the son of the female servant shall by no means be heir with the son of the free woman. The son of the free woman are those that Yehovah knew beforehand, those who were chosen. Therefore, brothers, we are not children of the female servant, but of the free woman. And the matter was very evil in the eyes of Abraham because of his son. But Elohim said to Abraham, Let it not be evil in your eyes because of the boy and because of your female servant. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Yitzchak your seed is called. So again, Abraham's just discovering who YHVH is. In his eyes, the matter was evil. He says, no, listen to what Sarah is saying. And of the son of the female servant, I also make a nation because he is your seed. So physically on the earth, they're going to become a nation because they are Abraham's seed. But that's nothing to do with whether or not they will inherit the kingdom. And Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water which he gave to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, also the boy, and sent her away. And she left and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water in the skin was used up, and she placed the boy under one of the shrubs. And she went and sat down about a bow shot away, for she said, let me not see the death of the boy. And she sat opposite him and lifted her voice and wept. And I think there's something that we can understand from this, from what Paul wrote in the letter to the Galatians. Okay, the son of the female servant. Okay, it's interesting to me that it says that she sat down about a bow shot away, because the idea of the Torah, the idea of sin, is implicated in that is this idea of hitting the mark, and there's all of these kind of archery terms which are connected with this. So it's interesting that it says about a bow shot away, and it's interesting how this passage ends. It says, and Elohim heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of Elohim called to Hagar from the heavens and said to her, what is the matter with you, Hagar? Do not fear, for Elohim has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Arise, lift up the boy and hold him with your hand, for I make a great nation of him. And Elohim opened her eyes. She saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin with water, and she gave the boy to drink of this water. So this is somebody who was following Torah by works of the flesh in the allegory. And Elohim was with the boy. Her eyes are opened. She gives him water to drink. Elohim was with the boy, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. Again, he became an archer. He became one who hits the mark. Okay? Elohim met him or heard him where he was at. Then her eyes were opened. She gave the boy water to drink. You know what that is? Idiomatic of. And Elohim was with the boy, and he grew to become an archer. So Elohim can meet people in that place as well if they turn to him in faith. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Mitzrayim. And it came to be at that time that Avimelech and Pichol, the commander of his army, spoke to Abraham, saying, Elohim is with you in all that you do. So there's a good example of somebody living righteously before Elohim, walking with Elohim, and the people around them recognizing, wait there, Elohim's with you in all that you do. And now swear to me by Elohim not to be untrue to me, to my offspring, or to my descendants. Do to me according to the kindness that I've done to you and to the land in which you have dwelt. And Abraham said, I swear. So they recognized this about Abraham. They could see the fruit of his life. It's a great picture for how we are to walk and how we are to evangelize, unless we are evangelists. And Abraham reproved Abimelech because of a well of water which Abimelech's servants had seized. And Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this deed, neither did you inform me, nor did I hear until today. So Abraham took sheep and cattle and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. So he says, look, I didn't know about this. I am not guilty. He says the same thing that he said to YHVH earlier. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves, And Avimelech asked Abraham, what are these 7 ewe lambs which you have set by themselves? And he said, take these 7 ewe lambs from my hand to be my witness that I have dug this well. So he said, I didn't know that you dug this well. And Abraham says, there you go. Here's 7 sheep. Take these 7 sheep and remember that I've dug this well. So he called that place YHVH because the 2 of them swore an oath there. Thus they made the covenant of YHVH, and Avimelech rose with Pechol, the commander of his army, and they returned to the land of the Philistines. And he planted a tamarisk tree in YHVH, and there called on the name of Yehovah, the everlasting El. Remember, they knew the name to speak, Yehovah, but they knew him as El Shaddai. That was the character by which they knew. And Abraham sojourned in the land of the Philistines many days. It came to be after these events that Elohim tried Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. He said, take your son now, your only son Yitzchak, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I command you. And Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey, took 2 of his young men with him, and Yitzchak his son, and he split the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place which Elohim had commanded him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place from a distance. So Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey while the boy and I go over there and worship and come back to you. Which is an interesting thing for him to say to them. It tells us in Hebrews that he reckoned that Elohim was able to raise Yitzchak from the dead. He told him, go offer him there as a burnt offering. He goes there and he says, we're just going over there for a bit, but we'll come back. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Yitzchak his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife. The 2 of them went together. These are the actions of a man of faith. He's been told to do this incredibly difficult thing. He doesn't know how it's going to pan out. All he knows is that he's going to go and he's going to do it. And that because Elohim has promised that Yitzchak is the child of the promise, that he'll work that particular aspect of the situation out. Again, this is all on the background of these people don't have the scriptures. They don't have the reassurances that we have in the scriptures. He's learning who Yehovah is just on the fly. Yitzchak spoke to Abraham, his father, and said, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. And he said, see the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, my son Elohim does provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering. And the 2 of them went together. It's worth pointing out because there's people at all sorts of different stages that watch our videos. When it says Elohim does provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering here, that's the accurate translation. Some translations, well, although they're not inaccurate, they say Elohim will provide himself a lamb, and in English that can make you think that he's going to provide himself as Yeshua as a lamb. The Hebrew cannot mean that. Okay, it can't accommodate that in the Hebrew. The Hebrew means literally he's going to provide a lamb for himself for the burnt offering. And the 2 of them went together. And they came to the place which Elohim had commanded him, and Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order, and he bound Yitzchak his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. It'd be interesting to know the conversation that went between them, between Elohim's going to provide himself a lamb and get on the wood. Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. So the way it reads here, this is what he was doing. He took the knife, he's going to slay his son. In the moment, there was no, I can't do this. You want me to kill my son? I can't do the Torah. He heard what was required and he did it. But the angel of Yehovah called to him from the heavens and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. So again, the model's there for us. We just do what we are instructed to do, and we leave the rest to Elohim, knowing that he has it in hand and that he is with us, and that we can do those things because he is with us. And he said, do not lay your hand on the boy nor touch him, for now I know that you fear Elohim, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And this is how we should look at events in our lives. Okay, if we see something that is a very difficult ask of Yehovah from us, we should recognize this situation in it. And we should say, this is a test from Elohim. Okay, that's what he was doing. It said at the beginning of the passage, Abraham was tried by Elohim. And he said, okay, comes through at the end. He makes it all fine for him. But he says, now I know you fear Elohim. And Abraham lifted his eyes and looked and saw behind him a ram caught in the bush by its horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up for a burnt offering instead of his son. Charlie mentioned before that this is kind of worded a bit weird. Now you can lift up your eyes and see something behind you, but what a weird way to phrase it. Okay, he took the ram and he offered it up for a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham called the name of that place Vayera, as it is said to this day, on the mountain Yehovah provides. That's what Vayera means, okay, Yehovah provides. But as I mentioned before, we can't say that the vowel pointings are never there in the name of Yehovah, even in the Masoretic text, because when it comes to place names which have his name in them, the vowel pointings are there, and they're exactly what they are in all the other places we find them, in the Aleppo Codex and all of the other various manuscripts. And I said that there was thousands of them. I think 15,000 was the last count that I heard, 10,000, and then 5,000 more were found, some even in the Vatican Library. But every single historical record that we have of how to write his name, even in the Masoretic text, is Yehovah. And it's 3 different tenses of I am. Okay, there is no doubt in my mind that that is what his name is. I'm not saying that that is what it is beyond any shadow of a doubt, but why would we choose another name based on a video or an article that we've read that put together a load of things which seem to be reasoned when we actually have historical record, and those things don't turn out to be exactly as they appear anyway. The angel of Yehovah called to Abraham a second time from the heavens. Okay, it always strikes me when I read that he's calling to him from the heavens. The angel of Yehovah isn't there next to him saying anything to him. He's actually calling down to him from the heavens, as he did with Hagar before as well, and said, by myself I have sworn, declares Yehovah, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, that I shall certainly bless you, and I shall certainly increase your seed as the stars of the heavens and as the sand which is on the seashore, and let your seed possess the gate of their enemies. And of course this also is written in the future perfect tense. I have certainly blessed you. I have certainly increased your seed as the stars of the heavens. It's already done to the one who was, who is, and is to come. And in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice, or have been blessed. Then Abraham returned to his young men, and they rose up and went together to Be'er-sheva. And Abraham dwelt at Be'er-sheva. And came to be after these events that it was reported to Abraham, saying, see, Milcah too has borne children to your brother Nahor. Uts, his firstborn, Buz, his brother, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Kesed, and Chatzo, and Pildash, and Yidlaf, and Bethuel. Bethuel bore forth Rivkah. These 8 Milcah bore to Nahor, Abraham's brother. And his concubine, whose name was Reumah, also bore Tavach, and Gecham, and Tachash, and Ma'acha. Okay, and these are people that Charlie is going to teach about next week. Okay, Rivka, the wife of Yitzhak. So we're going to see the pursuance or the seeking of the bride for Yitzhak next week. Shall we pray? Father, I thank you for the faith that you've given to us all. I thank you that you've allowed us to recognize who you are and what that means in this world, and you've given us the desire to be like you, to be like Yeshua. I thank you for the things that you've shown me this week, the reassurance that you've given me, and I pray for the people who are watching this that need reassurance, that you would use your word to reassure them, and that in the pressures that they have in their lives, they would experience the comfort that comes from you. Thank you that you're showing us who you are, and you're allowing us to remove the foreign gods from our midst. Bless you, Father. Amen.